Hi, I'm Keith Keller, author of the Infinite Recovery Handbook, and I am delighted to join you this evening here for Monday Night Live. And just so if I forget at the end, I want to thank Elizabeth and Andrea very much for all their help and support in making this happen and getting me here. So it was suggested, and I think this would be a wonderful idea. I'm going to invite you to join me in a short meditation, if you'd care to do that. If not, we're just going to do this for a couple of minutes. So if you are situated, sit down and sorry, the video just changed. Sit down and sit up straight. Perhaps slip off your glasses if that's appropriate, or whatever the case may be. And let's please start with 3 deep breaths. Inhale from way down low and exhale. Inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth with me. I'm going to do one now. And another one. And one more. And at the top, I'm going to take a little extra double inhale, if you want to try that with me. And if you haven't, please close your eyes and relax. Feel your body relax, all the tension leave your body, and do a brief scan. You can start it from your head, go down to your toes. And as you do that, feel any tension or muscle tension leaving your body. And feel a nice, warm glow sensation as if the summer sun were on your entire body, which feels bathed in warmth and comfort. So enjoy that sensation. And now focus your attention on the space immediately outside your body. Sense the space around your body. And now project your sensing out a little farther. Sense the space in the room that you are in. Project your sensation out to the reaches of the room that you're in, and sense the space, your connection to the space. The space is an extension of you. Now project your sensation out farther and sense your connection to all the space that is. You are connected to all the space everywhere. Connected as one. Now bring your sensation back to yourself. And as you focus on yourself, capture in your mind the feelings of your most amazing life. Feel as if your heart's desire is something you are living in this moment. How does that feel? Your best life, your dreams, your goals, your highest recovery, your best life. Feel it. Capture that feeling in your mind as if it's happening right now. How would you breathe? How would you feel? How would you move? How would you laugh? Pretty amazing feeling. So, as if your heart's desire has been realized, give thanks for that. Capture in your mind the gratitude. How good does that feel? All right. And when you're ready, bring your senses back to the present moment. When you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. And I hope that was nice little tune-up for what we're going to do this evening. So I guess I'll just get started. I'm Keith Keller, author of the Infinite Recovery Handbook. And the capsule version of me is that I'm a registered nurse working in the field of addictions. Scratching beneath the surface a little bit would reveal that I'm in long-term recovery from substance use disorder myself, over 30 years actually. And I'm most sincere when I say that my life has become a mission to help those who suffer as I once did, as well as a holistic perspective on Western healthcare. I'm trained in alternative and energy healing modalities and disciplined science-based personal transformation techniques. So what that means essentially is that I have multiple perspectives on the addiction problem. But more importantly, I have some innovative ideas about recovery. So I'm going to just talk about a few things this evening. I'll do my best to be coherent, and I'm just going to play with my screen here. Oh, no, don't want to do that. Sorry, I almost left by accident. I just wanted to close the... There, okay. Now I'm organized. So I'm going to play a few slides and talk about a few topics. I'll try and keep it coherent, and hopefully we'll have a nice discussion at the end. So let me get my screen going here. And this is the one. All right. And I'm going to move that. Okay, and that should be sharing. I think Andrea or someone will let me know if it's not. So we'll just call this some applications for recovery, and whether they're innovative or not, you can certainly be the judge. So briefly about me, come on, there we go. This is my earliest baby picture. And I had a strange and abnormal fascination with alcohol from an early age. I remember my father having a beer one day in a nice glass. It was a Saturday, and I think we were the only ones there. And I hounded him until he gave me a little version of the same glass. And now he was European background, ancestry. So maybe there was a little bit of a different take on that. But yeah, I think that might be the day I started thinking about alcohol in a way that might have been a little different. So I grew up and became interested in music. This is a picture of 12-year-old me, and I've got the 70s shirt there. I've got the 70s hair, which I certainly envy at this point in my life. Got the John Lennon glasses, and I'm playing the drums, which I became fascinated with. I blame Ringo. He was having such a good time, and every time I'd see him on TV, I'd want to do that. So I started doing that. And from a very early age, as I grew up, partying and drinking became integrated and meshed really with my music. And you wouldn't see this in that picture, but some of the stuff that was going on in my life, I look back on and understand that the experiences, my divorced parents, a little drama, a little trauma, and all the things that are the ingredients in the recipe for a predisposition for substance use disorder, for an addictive mindset. All these ingredients were starting to stew, even in this young guy here, who studied very hard. This is a related topic. I took up drumming and really put in the time early on. And I was thinking about this the other day. This youngster would, during the summers especially, would practice for hours a day, and I got good, or at least okay. And I think about my recovery and how I really put in the time and the effort early on, and that has worked out well. And the same, we're going to talk a little bit about meditation later in the talk. So that as well, I put in the time early on. So this is a pattern that I see where time and energy expended has, in whatever you're doing in life, seems to, pay dividends. I'm a believer in that, I guess. So this guy grew up into this guy who was clearly responding to some internal stimuli. And this is about 10 years later. I'm in my early 20s. I've got 80s hair now, and there's cat drama unfolding. And I'm out, gigging with bands. And to get there, that occurred all through my high school years, my formative years. I would be out on a school night getting paid in drinks. And my goal was eventually to be doing this. And beyond that, I foresaw, my hope was world domination as a musician. Well, that didn't quite pan out. But through my 20s, this wild hedonistic lifestyle continued, and things started to wind down, toward my 30s. My relationships I could describe as hollow shells. My livelihood was somewhat threatened by the stuff that was going on with my drinking and partying lifestyle, and just, the fact that I'd kept the balls in the air pretty well for a long time, and I was now starting to circle the drain around age 30. So I hit my bottom and went and did a stint in rehab and had an orientation period, as many of us do. The path from active addiction to stable recovery is non-linear, of course. This is what I like to say. There's no straight line. There's going to be a series of, for all of us, there's going to be a series of stops and starts and stumbles. And, the important thing is to get up. So I eventually did. And stopped after a second time, which was not medically supervised, which public service announcement time. If you are, or anyone is stopping drinking, especially from a large volume of consumption to trying to go to nothing, medically supervised detox is the way to go. Opioid use disorder, the same, but alcohol use disorder can be life-threatening. Seizures, cardiac problems, and worse can happen. Not that there's too many things worse than that, but anyway, I digress. So wrote it out on the couch and got into recovery. The traditional model, which I refer to as Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step programs 30 years ago were, when this was happening, were pretty much the only show in town. So, there I was, and I jumped in with both feet, as I referenced, put in the time, put in the effort, followed the directions, kind of gave myself to a degree, but I won't say I was the poster boy. I asked a lot of questions, had this stubborn streak, and kind of insisted on critical thinking. So anyway, time went on. I went back to school, got a nursing degree, bought a home, quit smoking, started taking care of myself, and life went on. So about 10 years ago, I started a different layer, a second layer in my recovery, which I regard as the disciplined personal transformation. And I began meditating in earnest. And I kid you not when I say I went from a guy who thought about and dreamt about writing a book someday to a guy within a year with I became a guy who writes books, and I started writing my first book in 2013, self-published in 2014, and I made every mistake you could make and had no conception about marketing or the things that are necessary. So cats are up to something here. I'm surprised the cat hasn't been crawling up my shoulder. So anyway, moving on. I've now written 2 books, and I lead a free online support community of about 1,000 people from 12 countries. A couple thousand more follow a related page. I work in the field. I'm active in various related endeavors. So, we live in confusing and stressful times. And as I put it, the addiction crisis has many moving parts. And, some of those parts are, change over time. Some of them are just the, diversity. There's the medical situation. There's the recovery situation. There's the rehab industry situation. There's the criminal justice situation. There's academic science, that are, trying to help with the problem. There's the stigma in society and culture, and in all those specific to all those areas I just mentioned. Science has proven addiction is not a choice, and the reason for that is because these parts of the brain stop talking to each other. In a nutshell, that's a simple solution, but addiction is absolutely not a choice. Medicine and healthcare say it's a disease that they can treat. But while medicine says addiction is a sickness, essentially, the criminal justice system paradoxically says you're responsible. So if addiction is a medical diagnosis, then wouldn't it be the job of medicine to take care of that? Well, yes, it is, say 14,000 for-profit rehab facilities. The American Society of Addiction Medicine would say, yes, it is. So let's talk a little bit about the medical model, which I've been working in for the last few years. So the disease model, or traditional medical model of disease, requires the presence of an abnormal condition that causes discomfort, dysfunction, or distress to the individual. I think we can agree on that. The medical model also takes into consideration that disease could be the result of other biological, psychological, sociological things, despite, here's the thing, an incomplete understanding of the mechanisms of these entities. So here's the problem with that. That meets the definition of a syndrome, actually, more than a disease. And stigma prevents addiction from being considered a chronic condition in the disease model, because it's not compared to all the other chronic conditions. We should consider, I think, that addiction could not really be easily reduced to a disease if you think about the many, moving parts, like the brain parts that don't talk to each other, and the results of that are the loss of control that is baffling, and the healthcare people still don't understand this. So I think addiction really doesn't meet healthcare's own definition for it. Apologies in advance for this next graphic because it's stigma alert. But it's the concept is so good that if you could please excuse that it said substance abuse disorders. But here it tells us 23 million Americans need treatment from substance use disorders. We've sort of upgraded that. That's a whole other conversation. And I believe that's conservative, perhaps might have been accurate back when they were saying substance abuse and didn't, know better. 10% receiving treatment, that I would believe is still accurate. By contrast, 85% of 29 million people with diabetes are receiving proper treatment. So this is an example of if medicine wants to call addiction a chronic condition, why isn't it doing something? And why is it essentially on the short bus of chronic conditions? Example, medication assisted treatment, which is something I've worked directly in. Now, I'm not knocking the concept, but what I'm saying is that diabetics take medication. People with heart disease, high blood pressure, and a host of other what are considered to be chronic diseases take medication. Are they taking assisted medication? Well, no, it's not. It's just sort of a given. Yet somehow substance use disorder patients are put in a sort of unique category as far as that goes. So this is one of the things one of many things I ponder. So here is the definition of addiction, according to the American Society of Addiction Medicine: a treatable chronic disease, medical disease involving complex interactions. And actually, there's something going on here. Closed caption. Okay, sorry, there was something in my screen. Brain circuits, genetics, the environment, individual's life experience. People with addiction use substances, engage in behaviors that become compulsive, continue despite harmful consequences. Probably anybody in this meeting knows this. And then they need another whole line. Prevention efforts and treatment approaches for addiction are generally, I'm sorry, I'm going to move myself, as successful as those for other chronic diseases. So yeah, this is kind of assuming, and there's a lot of this out there right now too, that the medical treatment of addiction is the whole picture, and it's not. It is just one thin slice of the bandwidth of the many moving parts of addiction. But this is something that we certainly need to take a look at as a society. Now, one thing about addiction that distinguishes it from other medical conditions is in any area of medicine, bad outcomes occur. People fail and don't survive sometimes. In cancer, kidney disease are some good examples, heart disease. But what about the sufferer of addiction when treatment fails? The responsibility somehow seems to be shifted to the patient, as in he didn't engage in his treatment, or she wasn't motivated for treatment, or they didn't follow through with treatment. That's part of, though, again, going back to those parts of the brain that don't talk to each other, and how we're failing in our attempts to reduce addiction to a chronic condition. So yes, that we know that's a fact. We know that the substance use disorder population does things that are unpredictable. They are non-compliant, kind of defying structure, don't fit into the box that healthcare is so accustomed to. And I spent the better part of 2 years working in a substance use disorder office-based addiction treatment setting. And the most challenging part of my job in that arena was to sort of facilitate the fitting of the substance use disorder population into that regimented and rigid box of primary care. And it was a huge challenge. So, we need to do better as far as that's concerned. All right. So what's going on with those parts of the brain that don't communicate, and why is it so challenging? Any discussion of addiction should include a reference to the neurotransmitter dopamine, which is involved in motivation, pleasure, and reward. A lot of discussion about dopamine now, and it really does factor in to a number of things. I'm just kind of seeing how we're doing on time here. So we all have a baseline of dopamine, and this is a little arbitrary, but we'll say that's, normal dopamine level is 100. So why do we have that? It's a evolutionary mechanism, something that, and I imagine animals have the equivalent, but it's something that helped to ensure our coming to the top of the food chain instead of being part of it. So we need to eat to survive. We need to reproduce to survive as a species. And great food will take us to 1.5 times. We'll get a little dopamine hit from that, a bump elevation in our dopamine level. And if you think about it, the sweet, high caloric foods are the ones we like better, right? Which are, more calories, store a little body fat. I'm thinking back, millennia, thousands of years ago, as we're evolving and, foraging and hunting and gathering, this mattered. We had to procreate, reproduce to survive as a species. Sex, twice the normal level of dopamine. Then the addictive drugs, cocaine, 3.5 times, prescription opiates, 5 times, heroin, 9 times the normal dopamine level. And then there's the Cadillac of addictive drugs, methamphetamine, 13 times the normal dopamine level. So where dopamine is concerned, what goes up must come down. And after dopamine spikes up, it dips down. And there'll be a little trough, they sometimes call it, or a dip, we can call it. And so you've experienced dopamine. You may not have realized that that's what was going on. But at 10 minutes before the store is closing, you will find your shoes, get your car keys, drive to the store for ice cream. Okay, you've been motivated to move across space to get something you want that will give you that pleasure reward. Here in the Northeast, we have seasons, and I put most of my jeans in the drawer sometime in the spring and take them out in September, October, put them on for the first time in months, and I might reach into the pocket. Oh, there's a $20 bill I forgot about. Like, it's like a little bonus, and I can almost taste the pizza it's going to buy. That is a little dopamine rush. So knowing this, we need to understand that when somebody goes through, makes a decision, they want to enter recovery and they need to stop using an addictive substance, on the other side of the withdrawal and the detox, it's 5 days later, I should be good to go, right? No, the whole dopamine pleasure reward system can take up to a month to recalibrate itself. So in other words, we are going to be in a long dopamine dip, which can last up to 30 days. And this is according to Stanford addiction medicine specialist, Dr. Anna Lemke, who has an amazing book called Dopamine Nation. I recommend it highly. And so this might be a reason, certainly one of the reasons, that people are not good to go when they get out of rehab, and struggle through those early times. So something we need to all bear in mind, that somebody who's just rolling out of rehab needs a lot of support. And I would always kind of make my patients aware of this, and they would pretty much always come back and say, I am so glad you told me that, because, helping them to understand that it's the normal recalibration of the brain that takes some time, as opposed to something wrong with them, is, tremendously helpful. So something to bear in mind as we think about helping people who are new in recovery. So what do we know about the brain these days? Well, a lot, actually. The brain is about 2% of the body's mass. but uses 20% of the available glucose, the fuel currency of the body. The brain is a complex organ that controls thought, memory, emotion, touch, motor skills, vision, breathing, temperature, hunger, every process that the body regulates, or regulates the body, I should say. It's made up of about 170 billion cells, half of which are these, which are neurons, the functional unit of the brain. And if you notice that these sort of resemble wires, you're absolutely correct. And like wires, their function is to carry electrical impulses called, electrical current called impulses from one to the other. A Canadian named Donald Hebb theorized that neurons responding to the same stimulus would start to form networks. And this forms the basis of our understanding of how brain networks are formed nowadays. And the catchphrase, neurons that fire together, wire together, is kind of a popular summarization for that. So example, the first time you learn a new behavior, a circuit needs to be formed in your brain. If the circuit is used repeatedly, it goes from being a little neural footpath to a big neural superhighway. And this is how learning takes place and has huge ramifications for learning the skills of recovery and unlearning the skills of addiction, which unfortunately we've learned. So here's an example. Driving the car. So this I owned a car that was a lot like very close to this. But the first time I got in the car for the purpose of driving, I was confronted with all these pedals. Hey, boys, behave. Come on. I'm sorry. Hey, catastrophe. I apologize. I don't know if the screeching came over, but if I close the door, it'll be worse. They'll tunnel in. Anyway, got in the car for the purpose of learning to drive, and I'm confronted with the pedals and the steering and the turning the engine on, and then I have to think about my destination, the rules of the road. So I know that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm basically consciously unskilled. And so a month later, I'm kind of driving along. Mom's next to me with her knuckles are white, and you know, I'm kind of doing it. But fast forward to the present day, and I'm sure you all relate. We get in the car, go to a routine destination, and have thought about everything and anything but the actual driving, right? So I've gone from being consciously unskilled to unconsciously skilled. I now don't have to think about it. It is kind of autopilot. And just the way driving becomes autopilot, the skills of addiction became autopilot. The feelings of addiction got wired in on autopilot, and the behaviors of addiction are now wired in on autopilot. So reversing this and learning the new skills of recovery, the new feelings of being in recovery and the new behaviors. This is a process that does involve the brain, the concept of neuroplasticity, etc. So in recovery, the things you did, the people you knew, the way of life you were accustomed to as an active addict don't work. Therefore, you can't bring them in, you can't bring that old life into your new life. The problem is that the old life doesn't play fair and will not go quietly. That's from my book. So how do we go from this to this? I believe the answer is this. So I'm going to talk about that for a little bit. I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm looking at the time. So quick, as I mentioned, I became someone who went from wanting to write books to writing books. And I credit meditation for this. There was a guy who asked a question at a meeting. His name was Murph, and he asked the question, the topic was meditation. How am I going to meditate? I can't stop the chatter in my head for 5 seconds. And a word about Murph, short for Murphy. He had struggled, and I watched this man, you know, come to meetings intoxicated, sometimes be a little disruptive. I once was leaving and saw him urinating on the side of the church. But he kept at it and he got it. He recovered. And one time I asked him, hey, I remember you said this thing. Don't you think that you could meditate for 4 seconds? And a little light bulb went off. He kind of thought about it. So the point of that is that there's always a starting point in meditation, as with anything. So let's see where I am here. This is kind of interesting because, you know, meditation has come a long way in the last 50 or so years. So pictured here is His Holiness the Dalai Lama meeting with some scientists from the Mind Life Institute, and they were having what they called a dialogue on destructive emotions. And on this occasion, now the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, had been very forthcoming and availed himself to the scientific community, like since the late 80s, I guess, but this was in the year 2000, where he challenged the participants to explore the effectiveness of contemplative practices in cultivating positive emotional states based on evidence-based research. In other words, the Western scientific approach toward the goal of finding ways to teach the practices of meditation in environments that were secular. In other words, while he came from the Eastern religious philosophical school of meditation, the whole approach was compassion and caring, and he wanted the whole world to have the benefit of that without necessarily having to become dedicated Buddhist practitioners. And today we owe the discipline of science known as contemplative sciences largely to this effect. So this is in the year 2000, and he challenged these people, let's do that. And in 2 years, that living room dialogue turned into this. And today we have so many benefits from this. The studies that have been done on meditation are just amazing. And the results. And I think we see this practically in the applications that we can put on our phone, or the mere fact that we're, you know, here talking about this today. And probably to a large degree, it traces its lineage to the form of meditation I learned 10 years ago. So yeah, some cool stuff. So let's look a little further. I'm going to kind of get my slides a little organized. And I don't want to make exorbitant claims about meditation. Now, there is a lot of data and scientific research to support many benefits of the practice of meditation. But for the sake of substantiating the statements I'm about to make, I'm going to go with, according to Stanford neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, who has a wonderful podcast, known benefits of meditation and the practice of meditation include enhancing sleep, enhancing focus, reducing inflammatory cytokines, improving the outcomes of cancer, reducing pain, improving mood, reducing symptoms of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and there's no good sound effect for that, sorry, and many more. So, yeah, this is a representation of the electrical current of the brain, which I mentioned earlier, and that is measured on this electroencephalogram. Here's representation of that. See the electrodes register the electrical impulses through the skull and skin, wired up to a harness, and now my cat's at me. And here's the readout. And this is yours truly. 10 years ago, I am wired up and about to go meditate on an electroencephalogram. But as we can see here, these look like waves, hence the name brain waves. So depending on what we're doing at the moment, these brain waves will reflect that in the speed. It's measured in something called hertz. And if I'm asleep, I am in this range down here in delta. I think you can probably see the cursor at a 0.5 hertz to 4 hertz. If I am paying attention, speaking in public, or at work, for example. I'll be up here in beta, which is here listed as 13 to 32 hertz. If you look at different graphics, you'll see different, I know this is 12 to 30, but this was a very good representation. There's also not listed here sort of a range of high beta. Now, if I'm at work and everything's going sideways, I will be, sort of up in this range, maybe into that range, depending on how bad the sensory overload is. So the objective of meditating is to quiet the mind, to focus the mind, and settle naturally into the alpha brainwave state. Between 8 and 13 hertz, where also there's a deeper state of meditation. But if I'm in alpha, I'm sort of in that twilight between being awake and being asleep. And so that's the objective of a good meditation. And we'll jump past that. So here's kind of an interesting study that brief daily meditation enhances attention, memory, mood, emotional regulation in non-experienced meditators. This is what people seem to be interested in. How long do I have to meditate? We'll talk about that in a second. How much work do I have to do? I'm just going to check the time here. All right, we're winding down here. And this is a wonderful study by Dr. Wendy Suzuki from New York. So 8 weeks, daily meditation, 13 minutes. And the control group they listened to a podcast. So the people who did the meditation for 13 minutes a day for 8 weeks had decreased negative mental state, enhanced attention, working memory, recognition memory, and decreased state anxiety scores on something called the Trier Social Stress Test, which I looked up. And it's a horrible ordeal where you have to give a talk to people who don't like you, and they make that known, and then take a math test. Now, I think I'd rather go to the dentist. So that's a very, very cool outcome. And Dr. Andrew Huberman said his lab has extensively studied meditation and says there is a tremendous benefit, or he used a word, I'm going to recant tremendous, but he said there's significant, that's what I'll go with, benefit to meditations as short as 5 minutes. Consistency is the thing. So thinking back to dopamine and how that affects all of us, certainly, but people in early recovery. Here's a study that I went looking for. Increased dopamine tone during meditation induced change of consciousness. So what they did, they put people in, while they were meditating, in something called a positron emission tomography scanner, PET scan, while they administered something called a tracer that competed in the receptor sites with the dopamine, which is all wonderful nerd speak for. It allowed them to measure how much dopamine was produced, and a 65% increase in the dopamine that people were making. Meditation. Okay, guys, we're really on to something here, and this is why I'm such a big proponent. So the axiom, what gets practiced gets improved, and what we do within our meditation can be the key to transformation, as I understand it. And we did a little of this in the meditation that I guided us in early on. Capture the feeling, make it as real as we can in our minds, and connect it to an elevated emotion like gratitude. And if an addiction is fundamentally the use of something external, like a behavior or substance to change our internal state, your ability to modify your own internal state represents a powerful path to freedom from addiction, opens up wonderful possibilities for transformation in recovery. So that's kind of the end of it. There's more about this in my current book, the Infinite Recovery Handbook. That's available on Amazon, and my website has all kinds of information. infiniterecovery.org is that, and I'm gonna stop the screen share now, come back to the meeting, and Apologies about the cats, and little scattered here, but it's been, such a, I see, 40 people. That's wonderful. And no, I'm just very happy to have been here. Again, thank you to Andrea and Elizabeth, and I'm delighted to be here. Let's have a little discussion, or answer some questions. Let's see if I can find the question module thing. Q&A, there we go. Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions or comments, I'd be delighted to talk about that. Oh, thank you, Andrea. Hey, what you doing? I'll introduce him if he jumps on. Oh, thank you. Let's see, do I have a backup plan to talk more? So I think I'm going to check the chat. Oh, cats are welcome. Wait, lovely comments. Thank you so much, folks. Mantra meditations on, oh, okay. Let's see, I'll go to the top question. No, okay, bottom question first. Can I discuss Debbie's question? Can I discuss mantra meditations and the effect on the brain? Not being a neuroscientist, I cannot, but I think that my hunch is that they have a similar effect to, I've been a guest of some Buddhist meetings, and they do this chanting, and I know that the repetition, it starts to kind of lose, you're just in it, and I think the effect would be that it would bring the brainwave state down into that alpha. It's just another means to quiet the mind. That would be my hunch, but again, I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a registered nurse working in the field of addictions. Music or silent meditation more beneficial? Great question. That, I believe, is an individual choice. And I am actually presenting here at a regional conference in a couple of weeks on the topic of meditation. And I go through, my short list of just suggested guidelines. So I do suggest to people that they experiment with that. And, and of course, I'm sure there's probably more experienced meditators here in this audience than I am. So, please, I don't mean to present myself as any kind of authority. I'm just somebody who is, probably, I am at the very bottom of what is considered to be the advanced I probably have about 1,200 hours of meditation experience, including workshops. So it's an individual taste. If someone does use music, I would suggest that perhaps something without, instrumental would probably be better. Lyrics would certainly distract me. I sometimes use music. I sometimes use guided meditations. I can't remember exactly, and I don't want to, endorse particular ones. It's really a matter of, finding out what works for you. Nature sounds sometimes, the ocean, or streams or things like that. I have a few of those. Doreen asks, my son stopped smoking weed, no treatment, got depressed. His marriage ended and died by suicide. I am so sorry. You and people like your son are why I'm here. Low dopamine. I can't speak, and your loss makes me so incredibly sad, and I, without knowing more about the situation, while there is no detox protocol for marijuana, there certainly is a withdrawal that is acknowledged in the addiction medicine community. Irritability, uh, sleep dysregulation, appetite disruption. These are the things that people see, and it is entirely possible that it perhaps could have been a domino that started to tip other dominoes. I'm so sorry, and answers sometimes help, but your loss makes me very sad. Um, Anonymous attendee asks, is guided meditation laying down before sleep count as meditation that the brain would benefit from? I believe yes. There really aren't no rules. And some people meditate with the eyes open. It's called an exteroceptive meditation. I could be focused interoceptively, what's going on inside my body from the skin inward, or exteroceptively outward. So opening my eyes would, the question's gone, so I hope I get this right. While lying down. Now, I choose to sit up because if I don't, if I'm too comfortable, I could easily fall back to sleep. I'm a morning meditator. Everybody has their preference. And I meditate in the morning because as my brain is coming up out of the delta, to wakefulness, if I don't go all the way up to beta consciousness and become awake and alert and attentive, it just seems more efficient to me. And also from a time standpoint, that's when it seems to work for me. The lying down piece is fine if that works for you. Hope that answered the question. Donna asks, does alcohol release any level dopamine? Yeah, it does. But of course, there's a trajectory as tolerance builds and dependence forms that, and this was my drug of choice. Well, that and everything else, but we kind of go from, we get that nice euphoria, and this was my story. I caught a perfect buzz when I was about 13 and spent 2 decades trying to reproduce it. So yes, with the caveat that it will start to go away, and eventually we have to drink just to maintain, and then we can't even get up to feeling okay when we drink. Kristen asks, what in my experience are the most effective ways to motivate addicts in early recovery to adopt weekly schedules and other structure and routine that they may be strongly resistant to? Hey, Andrea, could you leave the questions up until I kind of have a chance, in case I need to look back at it. There are many ways to motivate people. If they have made a decision to change, they're already kind of, in a better place. It's the people that have no desire to change. They don't think recovery is possible, and they aren't even thinking about change. That's the challenge. And I believe that no effort on the behalf of someone's recovery, or on the behalf of someone struggling with someone's substance use disorder, by me or by them themselves, is ever wasted. And there's a cumulative effect to these things that, the 5th stint in rehab might be the charm. One never knows and should never, count that out. So to motivate people in early recovery, I strongly encourage people to explore and get out and find out what style, what approach, what pathway to recovery works for them as unique individuals, because we should all have our own approach to recovery based on our unique circumstances and experience. Also, approaching recovery as a skill, and this is one of my mantras. Recovery is a skill that can be learned by anyone. So finding, exploring the options. It's a wide world out there. Some people, bless them, they do well in the traditional model, which is wonderful because it's zero cost, easily accessible, it's everywhere. And it's got this sort of whole change model, the 12 steps, which I've done myself, and I endorse that they are cohesive and very, very effective. kind of take a while, to change. And I'm sort of about working smart instead of working long and hard. And I realized that, wow, okay, I spent a long time, and when I reverse engineered what I did in recovery, based on, what I've learned about neuroscience, I thought, so a motivated individual could do everything I've done in a much shorter period of time if they had the kind of guidance, and understood the principles of deep learning, and recovery. So, strongly resistant. It's a matter of time. We meet people where they are. It's called harm reduction, and um, in working in, um, office-based addiction treatment, I was not there to project some ideal of recovery onto people based on what my personal experience was, certainly. And this is very important, and that you know and especially establishing rapport with people who are not yet fully ready to engage. They're a long way from walking into that church basement. Um, Checking on the time here. Um, yeah. There's a lot to that, but I think offering people many options that might suit their personal needs, and accepting that it's a process might be the solution to that. Thank you for the question. Um, and Elizabeth, with the relapse rate so high using the current medical model for treatment, isn't it time to change our model? Oh, well, that's a lot of what I'm, here for. Um, do we accept that relapse is part of the process? Well, I don't know if I'm going to accept it and say it's okay in the strict sense that, we'll accept that. But we certainly will accept people who have their own process, and need to learn some hard lessons themselves. This is something I always say. It's a wise person who learns from the mistakes of others. I was not that person. And I could have, read every book on the shelf and listened to everybody in the room say something, but half the time I still had to learn it for myself. So I agree that, at least in terms of the medical model, it's got a long way to go. Um, I'm going to be a little controversial and say, a lot of doctors out there are victims of their training. And once they learn how to safely prescribe a medication within a framework of, the medical model, they really don't think about whether or not they should. Medications for addiction treatment, the new MAT, because we are very conscious of how we say things now, um, is very appropriate for many people, but it's not the solution for everybody. So behavioral health is part of the medical model. And now recovery coaching is becoming part of the medical model, and alternative and complementary healing practices are becoming part of the medical model. So hopefully the medical model can expand, continue to not only incorporate, because I love that there are people out there who look at brain scans all day long, right? And they've gone to school for a zillion years, and again now they're sort of stuck in this, that's what they do. So knowing that the nucleus accumbens is cut off from the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is wonderful, but how's that going to help the guy who's just trying to recover? Well, maybe people like me who can translate that into, sort of an understandable language about dopamine, and how people are going to be vulnerable for the first 30 days after they go through a detox process. You know, we have to kind of work together and find our way through this, because like I said, there's many moving parts to the addiction problem. And, I certainly can't keep up with all of them, but I'm very committed to learning something every day, and doing my best to help people. I am so honored and appreciative of this opportunity to engage with this wonderful group. You guys are awesome. And please reach out to me. I'm available on Facebook. You can get me through my website. There's a lot of information, resources. And if you're interested, I wrote a pretty nice book about recovery. Costs less than a case of beer. Thank you, everyone.